So many people are feeling blocked from connecting with other people. And if you find yourself trying and trying, but everything seems shallow and nothing seems to lead to friendship, or people even seem to be pulling away from you, there might be a problem with your attunement, your ability to sense another person's openness or read the room, as we say. So when you're not connecting, instead of just assuming that other people are closed, there are some adjustments that you can make in yourself that help you to tune in better so that other people feel seen and heard and like you're present with them. Now, attunement is a super attractive quality to people in almost every context. If you've got attunement going on, people will be drawn to you. And you don't have to be born with it. In fact, if you had trauma when you were a kid, your attunement might have been damaged, at least a little bit, which has telltale signs in some behaviors that I'm going to list for you in this video, all right? So here are some of the signs that your attunement to other people might be a bit off. First, you give unsolicited advice. Do you know what that is? It's when you tell people what to do when they didn't ask you, what should I do? And this is so common. People do it to each other all the time. If you've ever had like a major illness, when you tell people, I have a major illness, I've been in the hospital, you are going to be bombarded by people who are not attuned, who go, oh, you know what you need to do. You know what medicine you need to take. You know what doctor you need to talk to, what device, what machine, what type of diet, what you need to do. And they'll do this around like weight loss. They'll do it around career, and they'll do it around feelings. And I've noticed that among women, sometimes a lot of how we connect with each other is go, hey, how you doing? How you doing? Well, I'm having this hard thing go on. Well, good friends, women friends, men friends, any kind of friends, are able to hear you say what you're struggling with without jumping in and projecting, right? that they have the answer for you and you just got to listen to them. It's a lack of attunement to assume that just because you're having a problem means you are completely out of touch with solutions. So I remember I was in the hospital on and off for about 4 years, some years back. It was really rough. It was an injury caused by a medical error, a surgery where they damaged a part of my body, and I had 14 surgeries for them to try to fix it. And it didn't go very well. In the end, I did heal, but it was a huge process. And when I would tell people about it, they're like, you need to be taking this vitamin. You need to be eating this. And it was so frustrating because the thing is, it was an injury. It had nothing to do with what I was eating. And in fact, in the end, how I healed it was by tuning out all kinds of input and getting in touch with myself. And what I could feel in myself when I became attuned to myself was how traumatized I was inside. I had this like chronic level of freak out going on. I had been going through a lot in my life. I had gotten divorced and was a single mom. I had lost my job. I had tried dating someone and they died. I had this like going on in my body all the time. And when I was able to be quiet with myself, which actually, ironically, being in the hospital allowed, I could feel what was going on. And I returned to my daily practice techniques, which, by the way, if you've never done them, I talk about them all the time on this channel, and you can find them down in the description section. It's a free course. It's a technique for getting the fearful and resentful thoughts out. And it's been very powerful for me to attune to myself. So when people give unsolicited advice, they're basically like jamming the radar on your own intuition about what's going on. It's not a good thing to do. It's a projection of themselves onto you, and it'll generally be received as criticism or not listening, or at best, maybe just like self-centeredness. So it's not good to give unsolicited advice. And you can do something instead, right? You can say, I had something like that once. If you ever want to hear what I tried, I'm happy to tell you. And I'm telling you, they probably are not interested. Sometimes when people are sick or unemployed or having a hard time, they're already overwhelmed. What they need is just to know, like, I'm your friend, I'm hearing you, I get it, I feel for you. You can just be present with somebody when they're struggling without telling them what to do. And when you do that, there's like more closeness comes in. You feel more connected. And when your friends feel more connected to you, they might come to you to ask your opinion about things. But that is one really very simple fix that you can make. It's easier said than done, but just to totally end unsolicited advice about what other people should do. All right, a second way that your attunement might be off is a lack of curiosity, where all your opinions about everything are set, everything is, a comment on stuff. Oh, that's because this, and the government always blah, blah, blah. And it's instead of having something you ask about, so not having curiosity. So when somebody says something that you've never heard before or you don't agree with, you could say, that's interesting. What made you come to that conclusion? And actually just listen and let go of your agenda to correct them or try to make sure they understand your way of thinking, but be sincerely curious about how other people feel and what they believe and how they see the world. And you can come out of that still disagreeing with them, but closer to them. And I'm telling you, if you haven't yet developed a capacity to be comfortable in the presence of people who have different opinions, now I'm not talking about opinion bullies. Nobody's comfortable with people, being bullies about that. But that's why I'm saying, don't you be an opinion bully. You can have an opinion difference and have it kindly without any kind of criticism. And I want everybody to remember, it's actually good for people to see things in different ways. If we didn't, we'd be robots, we'd just be parts of a computer. If we didn't have a different lens on things. And especially in this time where I just think that, powerful forces want us to be angry at each other, want us to believe that there's only one right opinion and everybody who doesn't have it is bad. This is very, very harmful for your relationships. And if you're going to make a positive contribution in the world, you actually need to learn to stay connected with people and to have a social fabric that is tolerant of people seeing things in different ways. Not just people having different lifestyles, which I think is at this time in history, people are a little more tolerant, but seeing things in different ways, and let that be okay. And respect people and not assume that they only have a difference of opinion from you because they're evil or stupid or low information or something, but that they actually have a life experience that's led them to that. Be curious. It's a good way to connect. So you can ask people too, and it's not just about controversy, but when, let's say, people have gone on a vacation, right? You can say, tell me about that. How did it go? What was the best part of it? Is it true that the food in France is so good? Because I was just in France. And it's really fun for me when people ask me questions about my vacation. And then out of attunement, I try not to go on, but it really does make me happy when people are aware that, I just did some traveling and I had some hard things happen and I had some exciting things happen. My son got really sick and I hurt my foot really bad, and I don't need to go on about it, but I love that people are curious. So another thing you can express curiosity about, and this is a way to invite people into a conversation, and it's actually a nice little gentle tactic you can use if things feel tense or disconnected, but you can notice something that's in the environment. It's so nice when you don't have to always talk about my feelings, your feelings. You can talk about just the world. You can talk about the environment. And so my husband and I were walking the other night, and there was a really nice sunset. And I was saying, hey, come here, look at this. I wonder what makes the clouds do that. They were piled so high, and they were shimmering, and they had these colors. And I was wondering what makes them do that. And that's me just saying, hey, look at the sunset doesn't tend to get his attention as much as a nice science question. And I didn't ask it to manipulate him, but I just noticed he really likes it when I ask questions and ask him to think about something and about with the why of things. He loves that. And so I noted that, to put that in my pocket as a way to connect with people. All right. Here's another way that our attunement can get off, and it's insensitivity to other people, especially the high points and the low points. So let's say that somebody just finished a training or got a degree in something. So we know that sometimes, but have you ever gotten so caught up in your own life or gotten so overwhelmed with your own problems that you forgot to ask friends about it? Or to say, hey, you finished the semester, didn't you? And it was your first semester in your new program. How was it? How'd you do? Well, good job. That was a huge accomplishment. I know you going back to school at this point was a big deal. You know, if you think that there's anything wrong with laying it on a bit thick, there's nothing wrong with laying it on a bit thick. People are walking around so hungry to be seen and recognized and validated a little bit. So for the example of somebody who's gone back to school, you know, that is a big deal. How many people would like to go back to school, but really couldn't overcome all the barriers in front of them? A lot. So when somebody does do it, we gotta hug that person, celebrate them, maybe bring them a cupcake or whatever, you know, something special to recognize that something good happened. To not do that is insensitive, and it doesn't foster connection. And then conversely, when people have had something sad, so let's say their parent died and it's a year later. And this is one thing that Facebook can be handy for, is you know when it's somebody's birthday, because there was a time when I used to remember everybody's birthday, but now I don't, and I have so many people connected to on Facebook that I don't always even know who they are. So I don't go and rush in and say happy birthday to people I don't know. But I try to show up and honor people for their high points, things like birthdays, or if I'm, scrolling through social media and somebody's showing a picture of a grandchild or a new house or a really, beautiful pair of running shoes or something. I try to show up and acknowledge it for them. I'm telling you, if you want to be friends with people, give them a little validation for what's wonderful and for what's hard in their life. That's kind of the material of what closeness is. You don't have to comment. You don't have to relate a similar experience to them. You can just say, oh gosh, those are fantastic running shoes, or the earring that you're wearing just caught the light in that picture and I was scrolling by and then I saw you and I saw how happy you look. Congratulations. So you can always find reasons to give people a kind word or a pat on the back, and you will be rewarded richly with a growth in your connection with them. Here's a weakness that we have sometimes, and it's a form of our insensitivity. You can't own mistakes. So a lot of us were not trained at home what to do when we're mortified or embarrassed about something we've done, or when somebody tells us, hey, you kind of hurt my feelings. So, what do? We clam up, we get defensive, we explain ourselves and justify it, we point out, well, you did the same thing, right? Or we know that we did sort of something a little bit wrong to somebody. Maybe we forgot to pay them back for a small amount that they lent us at a lunch or something. And we don't bring it up unless they bring it up. So this is another thing that's part of insensitivity. And it's totally like how people were socialized. And if you weren't really cared for as a kid, it can be really easy for your mind to always flip to trying to relate to somebody when they tell you something hard. So let's say somebody says, yeah, I went to the doctor last week and it turns out I have skin cancer. And here's what an insensitive person does, trying to relate, say, oh, wow, my aunt had skin cancer. And, she had this thing and they took them off and she did this thing. But you miss the part where you go, oh, wow, are you worried about it? How do you feel about it? And so what's going to happen now? And do you have everything you need? Those are the things that a sensitive, attuned person says. Because when somebody's telling you that something hard is happening like that, or something unpleasant or dangerous or life-threatening, the attuned response is to tune into the feeling that they're having. The feeling that they're having, and to let them know that you heard that. So likewise, this is a little bit of a different situation, so having a party. Have you ever done this? I throw parties. I wasn't always somebody who threw parties, but now I have enough healing that I really do like to throw parties, and my husband likes to cook, and so sometimes we have parties. And I invite people, and some people never get back to me, which is kind of insensitive. They're not thinking about how I might feel. Some people get back and say, great, I'm coming. Yay. Some people say, oh, thank you for the invitation. I'm not going to be able to make it. Okay, that's okay too. And some people say, oh, I can't make it. I'm invited to 3 different parties that day. And so if I have time, I'll drop by, but probably not. Ouch, that hurts. That's really insensitive to the fact that, I don't know, if you've ever, if you have this around throwing a party, no matter how many times I do it, it feels really bad when, when people don't realize that I was going out on a limb to even throw a party and invite them. And so I can handle it. I have my daily practice techniques to deal with it. But I have learned that when you get invited to a party, be gracious. You don't have to tell the person if you have to decline. You don't have to tell them about the amazing party you're already going to. That's a little bit insensitive. You just can say, oh, I'm sorry, I have something already scheduled, but I would love to spend time with you, and I hope I can come next time. And that way you're responding to the vulnerability of the invitation. So you're paying attention. All right. Here's another way that we can lack attunement, and I call it being shielded. And this is something that is really normal, but we develop these habits of being always so busy, or always in a crisis, or always so exhausted. Do you have any of those things? Like, that's something that I've done, and I actually am. I'm pretty busy. It makes me pretty tired, but I found out that when I talked about it a lot, I was actually shutting down connection with people. They were trying to be considerate and not bother me, so they stopped calling me. And I was like, hey, how come I haven't heard from you in so many weeks? And they go, well, you were so busy. You were always telling me how you're so tired and busy. Aha, okay, so lesson learned. My attunement was, I don't need to lay that on other people. I can set boundaries for my time and my energy as needed, but keep the channels open for the connection. So much of this is about boundaries. So many ways that people who had a dysfunctional childhood end up losing attunement is because the boundaries, the skills and practice of setting boundaries isn't there. When you don't have boundaries, you can't really afford to connect with people. You have to kind of come up with a way to keep one foot out the door if you're going to hang out with people at all. Because if you can't sort of say no or realize, oh, this isn't what I wanted to get into, or this party's getting weird, or this date is very uncomfortable, you need to know confidently that you can get out of it. So it's about setting boundaries. All right, here's another way that people lack attunement, and it's dogmatism. Just having very strong points of view, usually about like religion or politics or health, I would say, about what you should and shouldn't eat. And I guess we all know what it feels like to eat with somebody who's like, you're not going to eat that, are you? And that's their dogmatism. They have strong opinions about what should and shouldn't be eaten. And obviously politics. That's why, like on the Zoom calls for our daily practice group, we're just like, we leave politics at the door because a lot of people are involved and care and are affected by it, but we don't take it up in the group because we have a common purpose and we're very sensitive to that common purpose. We're learning a technique for stress release, and so we don't have to bring it into everything that we do. I mean, that is a boundary. With religion or lack of religion, a lot of what I've learned about people and about trauma, I've learned from reading the comments on the 700 or so videos that I've posted on YouTube. I can't even remember how many. A lot of videos. And people comment, and I try to read all the comments. I don't respond personally to all of them, but I try to read them. And there can be these very dogmatic comments there sometimes. So somebody might put a comment. It breaks my heart, this incredible tenderness that people bring sometimes. And they've watched a video that I've made, and they're telling me, or maybe they're telling other people in the comment section. I try to be attuned to that. I don't have to respond if they're sort of saying something to everybody. But they will come in and just share like, oh, this video is talking about something that's been so hard for me. And I've been sad all my life, and I'm feeling scared and discouraged about how I'm going to turn this around. I've tried certain things, it hasn't worked, and I'm a little bit hopeful, but I hate to get my hopes up. They're saying something so near to their hearts. So there's these very attuned people who will come in sometimes and say, I'm so proud of you, or I hear what you're saying, I relate, and I hope you'll persevere. I know you can do it. So attuned and supportive things. And then there's people who just come in and say, well, that will never happen because people are just jerks. That's dogmatic. That's a very negative point of view that they have, but they're basically putting their belief system out there I do a video, let's say, about like being attuned or something, and they just come in and say, it doesn't matter if you're attuned, nobody cares, nobody listens, all men are just terrible, or all women are just this. Or here's one, like I love religious people, but there's a way that some people are dogmatically religious and they get in there and somebody has just said they're struggling with something, they've been trying so hard, and they go, you just need Jesus. And I understand what they're saying, but the thing is, if it were true that you just need Jesus, then everybody who went to church would be a perfect person, which is obvious to the eye and ear that everybody is struggling. All people are human, whether they're religious or not, or this religion or that one, or spiritual. All people struggle sometimes, and all people are finding their own answers to these things. And so to just glop your solution down on somebody else is a way to shut down that attunement, that connection. And if you do want to influence people, if you do want to help them, if you think that the way that you do life, the way that you are spiritual or not spiritual, but that you have ways that are helpful and you want to influence people in a positive way, you start by allowing them to be themselves, and you give them space to find out who you are. And if they are attracted, they might ask you about it. Do you know that phrase, attraction, not promotion? They say that in 12-step, and it's so good. Attraction, not promotion. I remember when I first started going to Al-Anon, the program for families of alcoholics. It was so helpful to me, and I went running home to my family of origin. We had just had a bunch of family members die of alcoholism, actually, and drug addiction. And I ran home, and I'm like, everybody, this Al-Anon, it's the best thing. Everybody has to do it. It's the answer. It's the way. And everybody was just like, woo! They didn't want to hear it. They thought I was crazy, which I wasn't crazy. I had found help, but it wasn't effective for me to come and try to cram it on them. It was a lack of attunement. And if there's one thing I've learned from doing Crappy Childhood Fairy, I and you, none of us, we do not know the answer for each person. We don't know what other people need. We don't know what their next step is. And we do know that people need support. They need the presence of other people while they figure out their own next steps. While they do that. Now, I'm not trying to deny that there are ways of life. There's like religious practices. There are sets of principles, moral principles that you can guide your life by. Stoicism. I love Stoicism. Many of us do. So there's principles that you can use and follow. And it's fabulous that people before us have sort of figured out, here are some principles you can apply. And the Crappy Childhood Fairy method has principles. We have principles like, not all the answers come from talking about the trauma. Sometimes you can refrain from talking and write about it instead. And sometimes healing comes not from looking at the past, even though that's necessary sometimes, but about looking at what are the symptoms going on right now. Those are some of our principles. But if I came out at you yelling and just going, stop talking about the past, stop talking at all, you have to write, you can't look at that. Would you listen to me? No, and nor should you. I don't have your answers. I can tell you what's worked for me, and you get to decide if you do that. So when we interpret everything through our own personal lens, whether it's health, politics, healing, religion, it's a way that we separate from other people. And I think a lot of times it's motivated by an insecurity or even a joy sometimes, that, hey, I found what works. But in maturity, as we get older, I might be older than you watching this for some of you, and I'll tell you, you start to learn like it just doesn't work. And that's also why in our daily practice calls and group coaching calls, we say don't give unsolicited advice, especially stuff like, you know what you need? You need a good therapist. That's really common. A lot of people, if it's not like a religious thing that you have to do, that they believe that you just have to do and it will solve all your problems, they think that if you just went to therapy, it would solve all your problems. Well, that's also unsolicited advice. So we allow people to sort of find and discover intuitively and through their own experience what they believe their next steps are. Unless they break the law, in which case we decide for them. That's the exception. All right. Another way that you may be lacking attunement and sort of pushing people away is by being untrustworthy. And I'm talking about very specific, subtle things that not everybody realizes they're doing. One is gossip, all right? Gossip is very fun to listen to. And it also clues us in that the person who's doing the gossiping is not a safe person to tell things to. So simultaneously, we would be drawn to somebody who's gossiping, but pull away. So if you're doing gossip, talking about people who aren't present, for entertainment purposes, even if they're strangers, you're cluing other people that you're not quite a safe person. And so, consider letting that go, just not gossiping. Another sort of habit of speech that can trigger people to feel sort of unsafe around you is exaggerating. And I'm the queen of this. That's which is an exaggeration. I'm not the queen. I'm not the worst there ever was. But I had a habit of speech, and maybe I still do. I've worked on it, but where I will sort of like push it to the top. I'll be like, everyone feels this way, nobody ever and I've tolerated so much all my life. So I just use these like nobody, always, ever, all my life. Can't, won't. And it's an exaggeration. And I'm trying to make my point, where I think it comes from is I wasn't listened to very well. And I probably developed a habit of being a little more dramatic to try to like grab people by the ears so they would listen to me, the grown-ups in my life. But the thing is, it comes off as a little bit, shaky as a trustworthy person. That's not the person who exaggerates. Comes off as a bit of a loose cannon. And so that was something that I had to work on. And then here's one that I don't like, because I'm a really busy person. I have a little bit of free time, but sometimes people will say, hey, you want to get together? And I'll go, yeah, sure. And they go, when are you free? And I'll go, well, I have this time and I have this time. And they go, okay, I'll get back to you. And often they don't. And that feels a little bit untrustworthy to me too, or it hurts a little bit. And it makes me a little reluctant to make a plan with people if they don't just come through. Like if you ask, then come through and you tell me when you're available and let's get that thing decided. Or say, I can't decide right now, but I'll let you know by this time so that I'm not holding all that time available. It just hurts a little bit. It hurts a little bit and feels untrustworthy. I guess what people call that is flaky. So why do we end up with these habits? Even if we're good people, why do we end up with these habits that lack attunement? If you recognize these traits in yourself, it's very likely that you developed them because your family had those traits, or they didn't train you. They weren't really present with you, socializing you and teaching you, sort of the fine points of interacting with people and how to be an attuned person. Now, even if they trained you, if you went through a lot of neglect and abuse, that kind of trauma can dull your attunement. Attunement is, it's not just something that you learn, it's a neurological function. It's something that you can sense with your nervous system. Like when you walk in and you're like, oh, what's going on? There's some sort of like grim mood in the room. Or everybody seems like they're laughing behind my back. Like you can sense things, right? But when you've been traumatized, either because of the neurological injury or because you were gaslit about what was really going on, like, mommy's not drunk, get in the car. Either the neurological injury of neglect or the sort of lying to you about reality, you're not good at reading the room. You're not good at reading the signals. Like, even if somebody has to kick you under the table, instead of just like feeling the vibe when people are like, don't talk about that thing you're talking about in front of everybody here, it's private, right? That's attunement. Attunement, being sensitive to when people are trying to signal you, like, don't talk about it. Or come here and help me out. I feel threatened by this person. So also, because we're living with trauma symptoms, we can tend to fill up with fear in social situations. And you know what happens when we're full of fear? We become very self-centered. And I don't say that in a judgmental way, but it's just like, it's very hard to pay attention to what other people are feeling and what's going on when just trying to be okay in the moment is kind of using up all your consciousness. I always use the analogy, it's like having headphones on, very loud, but pretending you're in the room, but you can't really hear people. So you're not attuned. And then, to be actually self-centered is to see people as like, are they a good companion for me? Do I like how I feel around them? But not really asking ourselves the converse. Am I a good companion for them? How are they feeling around me? And a good attuned person is able to hold both of those things. Like, how am I feeling? How are they feeling? Am I a good friend? Are they a good friend? And once we start making mistakes and we feel some shame, we can get very defensive. And when we're defensive, it'll feel like any bit of criticism, if it's coming, if I did something wrong and you're about to criticize me, it feels like it's going to tip you over. It feels like it's going to break you. At its worst, trauma can make criticism feel like a mortal threat, and that you'll just die if it gets in, like you can't let it in. And so defensiveness is a survival strategy, but it works terribly in friendships. So when somebody's unhappy about something, now I'm trusting that you're choosing friends who have criticisms that are not vicious and irrational. And actually, I know we've all had those friends too. So that the rules don't apply to that. You need boundaries with people who are vicious. But when a friend is saying, hey, you really hurt my feelings, and if all you've got is defensiveness, what's going to happen as a consequence of that is a pulling away. So if you can hang out and hear what it is, and very gently with yourself and gently with them say, oh, I care about this. I want to hear what it is. I want to hear what your experience was. And then try not to say anything. Don't say anything right away. Just hold on. Just let it go by, right? Let it go by. If you don't know what to say, you can say, all right, I'm going to think about that. Thank you for telling me. And then you can think about it. I don't know about you, but with criticism, sometimes I need a lot of time to process. My husband is more introverted. He needs a lot of time to process basically everything. And sometimes if feelings are up, I'm just like, no, I want to process everything like right now. I want to talk really fast. I want to talk about everything. And he'll just be like, whoa, and he pulls away, right? He pulls away. So I make allowances for that. Now I know him well enough that he doesn't process everything so fast, and I have to give him space. And that's his defendedness. My defensiveness is to start like refuting and be like, no, I didn't do that, no. And it's not good. So actually like getting a little space and asking for it is a positive thing. Just saying, all right, I'm going to think about that. And then if you really want to go to the advanced level, get back to them about it. And even ask a question and say, hey, I wanted to ask you something about that. When you said that you felt like I was not talking to you at the dinner party, I was just wondering, was there a particular moment that was the most hurtful? Because I want to understand what happened. For that, you get an A. If you can learn what it is, if you can be open to what it is that's pushing people away, that's making your relationships too watery, not as substantial, not as solid as you would like them to be, you win. This is how your life becomes rich with relationships. All right. You're going to need boundaries. Like I said earlier, you're going to need to have confidence that you can get out of a situation, and therefore you can afford to get into a situation. So when you get invited to do something new or hang out with a group of people you've never hung out with before, people who have trauma wounds will often isolate rather than do that because the triggers that could be set off could be too much to deal with. When you have boundaries that you can just say, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to call it a night. Thank you for a nice night out. And they'll say, hey, where are you going so early? And you go, I know, but I was just realizing I need to go right now. A very gracious exit is your boundary. You'll be confident in using your boundaries when you know how to use them elegantly with the least amount of offense to other people. Also, to learn how to buffer your strong emotions. If you had trauma, sometimes emotional dysregulation is going to bring your emotions kind of rushing out quite strongly. And so one of the things that we practice in healing is emotional self-regulation. It doesn't mean we deny our feelings or stuff them down and never deal with them. We just start to become conscious that there are some situations where we don't want our strongest feelings kind of leaking out on everybody, that we're not in the best, safest situation. For example, like when I used to have a boss, right? I didn't want to cry in front of the boss. I did it a couple times, but it was a very difficult and uncomfortable situation. And I would have preferred to emotionally self-regulate and deal with my emotions over here and come back with clear communication, in order to negotiate what I wanted out of the situation. That was my preference. The beautiful thing about healing is you get to decide where you want your life to be. You get to decide how emotional you feel good about being and where you'd rather be discreet and calm. And you get to start having the skills where that works for you. So these are some of my tips on how to develop your attunement. I think it's a topic I want to talk more about. I'm interested to hear your experience with it down in the comments. Your mind plays tricks on you when you fall in love with a long-distance loner who says flat out they don't want a relationship. This is like an absent character. They're present only as an electronic voice or a digital image, but they're never a real person at your side, like living with you, going day to day with you from this experience to that experience. And this can be the perfect blank canvas for a limerent fantasy. If only we could be together, right? That's a limerent thought, never doing the math to understand that the person clearly, openly, strongly tells you that it will never happen. So who is avoidant here? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Sasha, and she writes, "Hello, Anna. I want your help to understand the situation I am in because I feel very confused about it and I can't make sense of it. I don't know if I'm deluding myself or if my intuition is right. So I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to go in and circle some things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's see what's going on with Sasha here." So she says, "About 2 years ago, I met a man at an online school for self-development and healing from trauma. He had a dismissive, avoidant attachment style, while I had already done a lot of healing, and I considered myself now to have an earned, secure attachment style. I had learned a lot about the dismissive avoidant style. So dismissive avoidant is one of the attachment styles that is fundamentally insecure, but it avoids people, and it's a person who avoids intimacy, doesn't want to talk about promises, doesn't want to talk about feelings, doesn't want to commit. That's the tendency. And it's on a spectrum. And then dismissive is the part where they're just kind of dismissive about it. They're just like, well, too bad. I had learned a lot about this style because 2 of my previous partners had this issue, and I poured my heart to try to understand them and improve the relationships. The relationships still didn't work out, but I felt a great appreciation and care about the challenges and qualities of people with this kind of attachment style. I thought it could work well for me if I found a dismissive avoidant partner who was willing to heal and become securely attached." Uh-oh. Okay, I can see what's going to happen right there. We'll come back to it. "I was very attracted to this new man I met because he was so dedicated to his own healing. It seemed to have maximum priority in his life, and he said he wanted to overcome the intergenerational trauma from his family and become a good father and husband in the future. We became friends and started having regular video calls that went on for hours at a time. We talked about what we wanted in life, and the more I got to know him, the more I saw our values, goals, preferred lifestyle, how we wanted to raise our future children, all aligned very, very much. I could not believe someone like that actually existed, and that I could have found someone so compatible with my own values. However, we lived in different countries and different continents, but he does not live in his country of origin. He moved a few years ago and has only been living in that region he's in now for about 4 years. He's 32, I'm 39. After a few months, I told him I had romantic feelings for him, and I told him I thought we were very compatible. To my surprise, he said he was open to talking about us having a romantic relationship, when he had previously mentioned he didn't want long-distance relationships. But it seems he had assumed in his mind that I would be moving to be with him, but this was not possible for me due to health reasons, and I told him so. After that, he completely shut down the idea of us being partners and refused to consider moving himself, though I tried to come up with alternatives. He told me we could continue to be friends, and I accepted it. I really tried to move on from my romantic feelings for him and see him only as a friend. Well, that right there. Okay, we're going to come back to that. But it didn't work. Of course not. Over time, he started to invite me to video call more and more often until we were seeing each other every morning and evening almost every day, hours at a time. I left it up to him to initiate contact because he was the one who needed more space than me, and I could accommodate that. We built deep trust with each other over time and provided each other with a safe space to explore our feelings and be vulnerable. I held space for him. Okay, there's all these psychology terms here. They're a little disturbing to me. I'll tell you why in a minute. I held space for him for hours while he cried. He told me about his deepest traumas, and he felt safe enough to share in a way he never did with anyone else. He told me he never felt so understood and loved. When he saw me, he told me he felt great joy, and sometimes he even mentioned it felt like heaven. The way he looked at me and these things he said all indicated to me that he was in love with me, but whenever I mentioned it, he denied it and said he had already told me we could not be more than friends. But his pull toward me was very strong. We tried to put up boundaries and see each other less often, but then after a while, we ended back to seeing each other every day by his own initiative. I said yes because I felt so happy to spend time with him. I wanted it too. We had few conflicts because we understood, yeah, you wanted it, okay. We had few conflicts because we understood each other so well and we had compatible values. Well, like not at all actually, but okay. And when a conflict did arise, we used the tools we both had learned to overcome it relatively easily and quickly. I never knew a relationship could be so joyful and easy. Joyful and easy, it sounds miserable. You're getting your heart broken. We grew together and brought out the best in each other. I felt free to be myself with him. I felt accepted and loved for who I am, and he said he felt the same. I was everything he said he wanted in a partner, yet he didn't want me to be his partner. I was so confused. I'm so confused word. In 90% of the time when it shows up in these letters, it's denial. So we'll talk about this. He told me he never had a romantic relationship before and had only been in love once in his life with a woman who rejected him. They never dated. He was still grieving that after more than 3 years. He said before doing this healing work, he couldn't even imagine living with a partner because he needed his space and independence. Recently, the desire to have a partner and live with a partner had become very strong for him. After 1.5 years of this going back and forth, well, not really going back and forth, just going in one direction. Him pulling me close and telling me we should be only friends when I pointed it out to him that he was treating me as his girlfriend. I decided that it was best for us to go no contact and move on because I could not stand it anymore when he started talking about wanting to find a partner who was not me and potentially dating other women. It's been 6 months since we broke up our friendship and we've been in absolute no contact for 3 months. I still miss him every day, and I remember all the beautiful moments that we shared and how peaceful and joyful and safe I felt with him, right, except when you were miserable and longing and feeling confused and used. I still remember all the things he said that made me think he was in love with me and how he kept denying it. All right, we're going to come back to that after 1.5 years you had to try to imagine it, and because he never told you that, okay? And how he kept denying it. I can't understand how he could walk away from a relationship like this and imagine he can find another amazing relationship easily just because he wants a woman who lives close to him when it's not even his country of origin and he's only lived there for a few years. I've been looking all my life, working so hard to heal myself and to make relationships work, and I never found anything comparable to what I had with him. I don't think I will find it again. Being realistic, I tried meeting new men, but they were disappointing and behaved in unhealthy ways that I'm not willing to tolerate anymore. I decided to look for a new partner because it just feels like a waste of my time and energy. I need your help to give me perspective. Am I just deluding myself here, thinking he's in love with me? When I asked him to give me a list of reasons why he didn't want to be my partner because I was having difficulty moving on, he refused. He never gave me a straight answer and got triggered and defensive whenever I tried to talk about it. The only clear reason was the distance, but to me, that does not seem like reason enough to give up on the love of your life. This is an issue we could overcome if we work together, but he didn't want to. I just feel so confused and can't make any sense of this situation. How do I move on? How do I open myself up to love someone new again, even when this beautiful relationship that was more than I ever hoped for also didn't work out? It all just feels pointless and hopeless. I hope you can help me. And that is from Sasha. Okay, how sad that you think this relationship was more than you could ever hope for. I'm going to start right out by saying, girl, you need to hope for more. You need to hope for a physically present partner who is really into you and wants to be with you and says so. So I'm just going to set the bar there. That's what you didn't have. Anything less is not going to do. It's just not going to do. I know some people meet at a distance, and very quickly you can determine if this is going somewhere. And I know people who have successfully dated online for a while, and then one of them flies to see the other and gets an apartment nearby so they can spend some time. Like, it's a big deal to try to actually do courtship long distance. And so you have to be very serious about it. And both people have to completely have the same intention for it. And if it goes on longer than 6-8 weeks with no intention for that, it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. You know, we could probably spend more time unpacking it and figuring out what's what if people live in the same town and you're young and you have all the time in the world. So, Sasha, I just want to say one of the core misunderstandings you have here is that you thought he needed healing and you are already healed and you consider yourself to have a secure attachment style. And I would just say the writing's on the wall, my friend. You don't have that. You're attaching really hard to somebody who said over and over again, I'm not into you, and who was basically your emotional vampire, just using all your devotion to feed himself without giving you what obviously was called for in that type of relationship, of you giving him that. Now, I don't really want to talk about him being a bad guy. I want to talk about you being limerent on somebody and using all this psychological jargon to make it sound healthy and wonderful and gaslighting yourself that it's the most wonderful relationship ever. This is not a wonderful relationship. It's a vampire you signed up for. Okay, so you've been going to this program, and I just tell you, like, when I hear online school for personal development and trauma healing, like, that could be really good, but if people are trying to date in that environment, there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot of trauma. There's a lot of limerent, weird stuff that goes on in personal development gatherings of any kind, and online is like a double element where limerence and sort of deception and we can build people up into something they're not, that we would figure out very quickly if we saw them. You'd be able to feel because what was going on here is he was obviously very avoidant, okay, fine. But you believing that, but if we would just work together, he would love me, that's whoops. Even people who are totally available, if they're not into you, it's not happening. That's the problem. I'm being very tough fairy with you because I'm trying to get through your idea that you're so healed and what's wrong with him that he doesn't see that you're the perfect match. So because you will give your entire life to somebody who tells you over and over again, I'm not into you in that way, and then you sit there and hold space for them, as you say, that is psychobabble for just sitting there being a sponge, a codependent sponge for somebody. Don't do that. He's not that for you, or maybe he was, but I have some workarounds you can use so that this never happens again. So let me get to that. Let me just come through this stuff. The video calls were an hour at a time. Were hours at a time. They went on for hours, even though he said, I'm not interested in you in that way. And you're like, that's okay. I'll give you hours of my time every day at your disposal and on your schedule. Well, he doesn't seem like a great character for doing this to another person, but I just want to say, you kept signing up for it, and in your mind, you're just thinking, surely if I do this for him, he will love me, and if he keeps coming back for more, it means he's in love with me and wants to be with me. But you've got to listen to what people say, first of all. They say, look at what they do, not just what they say. But when it comes to saying, I'm really in love with you and I want to be with you, that doesn't work two ways. People have to be saying that for it to be true. They have to be saying it for it to be true. If they can't say it yet, they're not ready to say it yet. Because it's not something they're prepared to deal with or act on. But the fact that he went looking for another relationship is flat out evidence that he really wasn't kidding you. He wasn't interested in that. But he was happy to have a friend who would be like a free therapist for him. I'm very glad you outed yourself. You told him how you felt so that you could move the story forward and not just be stuck in a fantasy. And then you decided to be friends. So I used to have this kind of messy relationship in my life too. And it was a miserable many years that this went on. And it stopped 100% when I did a couple of things. And one of them was I did not stay friends in any relationship with a man where one of us had feelings and the other didn't. That's a myth that you can just carry on and revert to friendship on that. Maybe after 10 years, maybe after 20 years, but even then, who knows? It is not healthy. It's an avoidance strategy of your own, and that's kind of what I want to call you out on. You have become the perfect girlfriend for somebody who's totally avoidant. You're online, you're there for him, you adore him. He has to give nothing, no promises, and when he gets the whim, he can go for somebody else. It's like the perfect girlfriend. So I use a word here called crap fit, meaning we fit ourselves to crap, to unacceptable situations or unacceptable people. You like the person, but the situation was He just, he wasn't going to give it back to you. It was unrequited love that went on and on. And so you fit yourself to that by just, I saw the escalation of the psychological words, of this being a meaningful thing, but I don't see it as sparkly as you do. I see it as a very sad loss of your emotional energy, the great love that you have to give to somebody for the future that you want. And this thing where you had the same values, I would just say a core value that's totally, the number one value in a relationship is like, I want to be with you. I can be with you. I will move to be with you. You are the one I want to be with. So I don't know if you want to categorize that as a value, but it's the core one. It doesn't really matter what is like-minded when it comes to romantic feelings. When you have that feeling for somebody, it categorically changes the nature of the relationship. And then when you play along that you're their friend, it's basically, this is going to be hard, a strong word, but it's manipulation, thinking that if you just play along, they will come around, that you can sort of trick them into it. And even when they say it's not what they want. So, trying to push them into it is not really respecting them, if you can believe that. Like, I think that when we're in this situation, we feel exploited, but that's not really what's going on. Yes, he's using you, and he's taking advantage consciously or unconsciously of your willingness to basically put up with any dribble that he'll give you, any little crumb. So you had a few conflicts, you understood each other, you repaired things. So you got confused when he said he didn't want you as a partner. But that is an unequivocal statement. It's not a confusing statement. You got confused because you had this fantasy going at the same time that was overlaying the reality. And so it is hard, when you're in that's limerence, when it's very strong like that. Limerence is a infatuation or intense obsession with somebody that overrides reality. It can become like an addiction. So you weren't really in reality. You kept seeing love where there was no love. It was certainly a kind of love, but it wasn't the kind of love that you kept believing you were receiving. And he had never had a romantic relationship before. So at 32, that is a sign of great avoidance. He said before doing this healing work, he couldn't imagine it, but then he did want to do it, which is a perfectly reasonable goal for somebody who goes through a big program for healing trauma, is to become more open to a relationship. But you say after 1.5 years of this going back and forth, but the thing is, it just sounds like he never wavered on saying he didn't want a relationship. He just acted like somebody very close to you. But that's why I use the word vampire. It's a lovely energy when somebody adores you and thinks you're so amazing and, fits their schedule to you. You always have this companionship on your terms. And that's a vampire. A relationship is two-way. They show up for you. They're with you on your birthday. They care when you're sad. They drive you to the doctor if you're going to need a ride home. They're with you. It's a whole different thing. So he wasn't treating you as his girlfriend. It was like this other thing while he thought about finding a girlfriend. I could sure see why it felt like that for a long time, but I'm really proud of you for asking him directly and getting your answer, and then you just got stuck when you had the answer. So yeah, now you haven't had contact. Good move. That is what you do about a relationship like this. Still miss him. That's understandable. And you remember all the beautiful moments that you shared, how peaceful, joyful, and safe I felt with him. Okay, you're remembering some of the moments. What you're glossing over is the moments where you were in emotional agony, that he didn't return your love, that he was trying to meet another woman. It wasn't joyful. It was unfulfilling. It was sad. It was a slap in the face. That's the trouble with unrequited love. It feels awful. It feels good at first because it's a little bit of a respite as long as you have hope. But it turns into limerence, like toxic limerence. Limerence is always toxic, but it turns into that when hope becomes the dope. Hope is the addiction. I just know there's hope, and then we'll start to go, no, I hear hope in this. No, I think there was like a hidden meaning when he said he wasn't interested. And, no shame, because I just know you were neglected as a kid. This is what we do. This is what we do. We end up with a superpower to see love where there is no love. But in adulthood, this is a terrible way to go, and it blocked you from finding real love, like real actual love with somebody who loves you and is totally excited to be with you. You're saying you tried to meet new men, but they were disappointing and behaved in unhealthy ways. All right, so what's happening now is what happens to like most of us, and you're right at a precipice of your healing. And the question for you in your healing is, Can you get past this idea that men just accidentally show up as like unhealthy and unavailable? Or can you see that actually you are choosing them? You are falling for them, choosing them, investing your emotional energy in them. The alternative is you shut it down as soon as you realize it's not going anywhere, and you continue to date and see if you can find what will work for you. Now, what happens with trauma is we sort of lose this capacity to dream of our future. We just don't know what we want. And I ask people with trauma, like, well, what would be your ideal partner? And there is almost always a long silence. It's almost impossible to articulate, let alone envision what we want early in healing. So as much healing work as you've done in the relationship department, I think there's a ways to go here, happily. It doesn't have to be like this ever again. What you do is you set up knowing clearly what you need, somebody who can be with you, is into you, attracted, available, and then, maybe be pretty Victorian about friendships with men where you're online every day with them. They knew something in those days. You don't get your emotional energy all invested in somebody if they haven't sort of declared that they're interested in you. That goes for either gender. You need to know if somebody's interested in you. And occasionally relationships will come together mutually after one person was reticent at first, but usually not when the other person pursued them, for a year and a half. So that's usually not how it happens. So you have to use your discernment to actually just let go of people if they're not that. Make good friends, close friends with women. Make those your friends, so that those are the people to have safety and joy with. Men, because that's who you're attracted to, you gotta kind of treat them a little differently. And I totally believe you if you have some male friends, but good, stable friendships between men and women don't have this element in them. They can't withstand constant contact. It's gonna turn into what you're dealing with here and break down and have to go to no contact, which is good. I would encourage you, take your no contact further. I'm glad you wrote to me. If you want to use my daily practice so that twice a day you have a place to put all your angsty feelings about the memory of him and what you miss, that's a good thing to do. It's a very specific practice. It's a free course that's always available down in the description section or on my website at crappychildhoodfairy.com. And I lead free calls every 2 weeks to do the techniques together with anybody who wants to come and answer questions. This is what saved my life. This is what gradually got me out of the dysfunctional relationship patterns too. And so that I could marry a real guy who really loves me. And we've been married now for 10 years and together for almost 16. So that's a whole different thing from what I used to put myself through. So one last thing, you said that he refused to give you an answer about why he didn't want to be with you. And this is often the case, and certainly an avoidant is definitely not going to tell you, but I'll tell you what it was. For one reason or another, he wasn't into you. He didn't have romantic feelings for you. And when we don't have that for another person, no matter how wonderful they are, the relationship can't move forward. There it is. That's what it is. And people out of kindness or avoidance don't want to tell us, explicitly that that's the case. They don't feel it. That's what it is. And that is your answer. His actions are your answer. And his seeking a new woman to have a relationship with using you as his friend for that, which you said you were, is your answer completely. He does want a relationship, but just not with you. So the sooner you can just embrace that and go, okay, that's why it felt the way it felt, and you can start to let the lessons in. It's hard to face, but until you do, you're kind of destined to keep repeating this pattern. So many people are walking through life wanting to solve problems of connection and purpose and productivity and trying to do it. And they don't even realize they're doing this, but they're holding their lives, and especially the people in their lives, at arm's length. And this is what I call covert avoidance. Covert avoidance. You look like you're engaged deeply with your life, but actually you're distracted, you're making plans and then canceling them, you're setting goals and then wiping them from your mind, and you're not being present for the people who are in your life. So everything stays shallow, nothing goes anywhere, and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. The ability to connect with people and form real relationships is often damaged in those of us who were neglected or abused as kids. And this is a huge reason why so many of us go through life sometimes feeling alone and like we don't belong anywhere and never feel quite loved. There's a reason, usually unconscious, for this, that we do it. And I want to talk about that because with practice, you can gradually heal that. Now, as you know, I'm not a therapist. I'm someone who has recovered from the sense of disconnection that was driven by trauma in my own life and the ways that I was still, holding life at arm's length, even when I thought I was doing everything right. So now I share my method with anyone who wants to learn how I did it, how to recover from those symptoms and connect more fully with people and life. Now, when you pull away from people and intentionally isolate yourself, and that's common, it's called avoidance. But with covert avoidance, you're not isolating intentionally. You might have a good career, you're friendly, you're interesting, there are people in your life, maybe even a spouse or partner, but there are these hidden, covert ways that you keep your interactions brief and superficial. You keep one foot out of relationships all the time without anyone quite knowing that that's your pattern. Sometimes you don't even realize it. But if you've been trying to connect better with people and improve your life, and it's just not going very well yet, it could be time to look at whether you're unwittingly sabotaging your own efforts with covert avoidance. To be happy and to fulfill your potential, you'll have to be able to form warm and trusting relationships with other people. And if when I say that, you feel like, dang, I don't want to do that, I do understand. And I know for a few people, they're so traumatized they really can't do people right now, and that's okay. You can keep listening to think about what you might want to do in the future to reconnect. For people with past trauma who get dysregulated, it is stressful putting yourself out there. But personal growth can only go so far in isolation. So if you're faking your connections, you are faking your life. So what can you do? Well, the first is know the signs. Here they are. Number one, you find yourself surrounded by people. These could be family, groups you're in, friends, but you hold yourself a little bit apart from them. 2, you're good at appearing and sounding like you're enthusiastic about time with other people, but you secretly don't look forward to it. 3, you often claim to be too busy or too tired to follow through on commitments or to agree to plans. 4, your partner or your friends complain that you're far away, uninterested, or uncommitted, even though you do and say all the right things to convince them otherwise. 5, you often cancel appointments at the last minute or you're late. 6, when you go to social gatherings, you look for ways to keep conversations short. 7, in groups where everyone is supposed to contribute, like a fundraiser or a potluck dinner, for example, you tend to contribute less than other people. 8, when you tell people why you can't come to or didn't show up at the event where you were invited, you tend to exaggerate problems, even fib, lie about them, like say you were sick or you got injured or you were too busy or you got stuck in traffic. That's a favorite. 9, you tend to go for partners who are unavailable, inappropriate, or not into you. And most of your relationships feel superficial. And you might feel pain about this, but you do it again and again, so it's a pattern. It's a pattern of covert avoidance. 10 is you don't like disappointing people, but eventually you often do. So that's what covert avoidance looks like. Some of us do it by looking at our phones all the time. Some of us do it by taking unfulfilling jobs and then hating them and postponing the day when we'll start living our life for real, maybe after we leave the job that we never should have taken in the first place. And then we've got a great excuse not to volunteer at the school or take a walk with a friend, right? Or we stay with people we never loved, just buying some time for that day when we can emotionally handle making changes. But we can't right now, we think. Though we seldom realize it, we're using avoidance to hold dysregulation at bay, playing fake with the good people right in front of us and wondering, why do I feel so alone? Now, once you have a way to calm your triggers and reduce the amount of dysregulation that sort of comes up, and like nervous system dysregulation is really common for traumatized people. Everybody has some. But once you learn to calm that down, your trauma wounds can no longer cut you off from your own life. So have you experienced any of the covert avoidance behaviors that I listed? Do you think you're drawn to these behaviors as a way to manage dysregulation, where you feel clumsy and awkward and flustered and overwhelmed and maybe spaced out? Like sometimes hanging out with people is so stressful, there's this price to pay that you get dysregulation, and it could last for days. Now, if you think about it, what are these avoiding behaviors costing you? You know, maybe you're doing it because you're trying to manage your dysregulation. Most of us don't realize that's what we're doing. But what is it costing you in terms of closeness and joy and accomplishment and love in your life? I encourage you to take time to think about this. Your whole future can be so much more wonderful when you can just shift your avoidant behaviors just a little bit and open your heart to other people and allow your life to gently expand from the limited little box that you've had yourself in. Now, if the thought of this makes you cringe, that's avoidance, and it's really normal for people who had trauma when they were kids. And you may have learned to look okay on the outside, you know, being cheerful and appropriate and functioning well enough, but you probably also learned to protect your inner state, protect your energy, by avoiding any kind of situation that might trigger and drain you. And when I say trigger, I'm talking about a stimulus that causes you to get neurologically dysregulated. And that's everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. Virtually everybody knows how to get back out of it. But for people with trauma, it happens more easily, it happens more intensely, it's a little harder to get out of. But again, your cognition is a little bit off. You're having trouble focusing your thoughts. You're feeling brain fogged or fuzzy. You feel clumsy, or your emotions come out too strong. It's like an emotional dysregulation. So sometimes people with early trauma, especially from childhood, will tend to have a lot more dysregulation and a harder time getting back to a regulated state. And we can all learn to get re-regulated. And if you're a fan of this channel, you know that I talk about this all the time. It's the subject of my book, Re-Regulated. I'm all about this. If you can learn to re-regulate your nervous system, you all of a sudden have a lot more latitude to be social, to tolerate situations that are uncertain for you or even a little uncomfortable. And alongside of getting re-regulated, you can learn handy skills like setting boundaries. When you have boundaries, you can afford to go to a party or go on a date because you already know, if it gets weird, I can get out of this situation. So re-regulation, it's what I teach. It's what my online courses are all about. It's what transformed my life from being tossed in, just like a tornado of emotions and brain fog and health problems after my trauma to get back on my feet, feeling good and thinking straight again. Now, dysregulation gets triggered by a stimulus, sometimes by a thought or feeling, sometimes by something outside yourself like a loud noise or someone criticizing you, or you get ostracized, people leave you out. It hurts, right? But it also can set off this whole thing where your nervous system stops working. And it's not just cognitive and emotional, it's physiological. Dysregulation is a big underlying cause of chronic disease. It's not just your thinking processes. It's your nervous system governs your entire body, your hormones, your immune system, your vital signs, your heart, your breathing. So when that stuff starts glitching, disease can get in, and pain and depression and problems of all kinds. The risk goes up if you're living your life dysregulated. So those triggers of people, criticism, ostracization, they hurt everybody. But for a person who's been hurt by trauma, maybe neglected in childhood, it can make you feel destroyed. It can trigger a period of dysregulation that makes it hard to think and focus and function for days or years for some people. And it's a huge price to pay for something that's easy for most other people, just dealing with people and social interactions, right? And to manage that dysregulation, because it has to be managed, it gets tricky when you don't have knowledge of what's actually going on, you don't have tools for re-regulating, and you don't have support from people who understand what is going on. So a lot of us will quietly just start pulling away, avoiding, quietly, covertly pulling away from people. Not at all planning to do it forever. We always think it's just for a minute, just to collect ourselves. And it does kind of work for a while. You can get some peace by saying no whenever people invite you to do something, or say yes but cancel later. You can get peace by working from home, not answering the phone or keeping things casual in your love life. Yeah, you can, sort of, maybe for a while, but you're buffering against your own life because it feels like the next interaction is just too much. So you put a few social interactions one after another, and it'll feel like too much. It'll feel like it's going to destroy you. And in your mind, it's going to get better any minute. Maybe if you could just get a little piece, you could be amazing. You could connect better. You could choose better. You could make more money and be more beautiful and enjoy your life more. We rationalize avoiding life, right? Like we think, oh, I'll call that person next week. I'll start tomorrow. But here's the first huge reason why it's important to heal this. If you go to such lengths to protect yourself from the way you feel around people, that destroys you too. So you can't win. You either go in there and get all dysregulated, feel destroyed, or you avoid everybody and you feel destroyed. So there has to be a middle ground solution. And there is. Without connection, your development gets frozen. On the outside, you might look confident and accomplished, but inside, you're like a sad little child walking around. Now, I call the problem covert avoidance because it's not like avoidant personality disorder, which is an extreme kind of anxiety and social avoidance on a level that would be fairly noticeable to other people. The thing that I call covert avoidance isn't noticeable to other people. You seem okay, you're interacting with the world, but also holding yourself apart from it. Now, one big sign of covert avoidance is when you're too busy or too tired all the time to do normal things that a person in your position would do, like keeping your living space tidy, making decent food for yourself and maybe your kids, going to bed on time, getting up on time. When you're avoiding this level of functioning, it's an inward directed kind of avoidance. And then there are the outward behaviors, such as being late to things. It's normal to be late occasionally, but if you're known for being late and you're late by about the same number of minutes every time, that's avoidance. Now, that was a big obvious sign I had back in the days when I was near the end of my first marriage, when my kids were small. I was late to everything. There's a t-shirt I've seen online before that says, like, sorry, I'm late. I didn't really want to be here. I didn't know that's how I felt, but that is how I felt. I was late to everything. If I said I'd come to your house at noon, I'd be there at 12:10 or 12:20. If a call started at 8 a.m., I'd join in at 8:02. If a group of friends were meeting up for a hike, I'd keep everyone waiting in the parking lot for 15 minutes and then get there all, harried and going, traffic. And I always had my reasons. There was traffic, yeah, sometimes. I had kids, I was busy, and I was juggling a lot of stuff. It's all true. And here's the sign. I was always telling people how busy I was. Do you ever do that? Is that kind of your mantra, your public mantra? People would ask me how I was. How have you been, Anna? And I'd go, busy. I've been really busy. And I'd say it almost like it was like I was bragging, right? Like it was a badge of accomplishment. So great that it excused my inconsiderate behavior, right? As if I were in a special class of people who are exempt from common courtesy. Yeah, that's not right. People didn't like it. I know now that my busyness was understandable, but the way that I let it affect other people wasn't always a good sign about how I was managing my life. And that my, broadcasting busy, I'm so busy, the busyness to the world was actually a form of covert avoidance. Being busy all the time and talking about being busy was an attempt to, shield myself, keep everyone's focus out here and not in here where I wasn't feeling that great about myself. Do you do that? Because for me, even though I was juggling a lot at the time, I was a working, divorced mother of little kids. Sure, you could take everything I did in a day to which I was showing up late and do it in the same amount of time, but just shifting the time to 20 minutes earlier. And then I'd be on time for everything and it just would have been less stressful and it would have helped me connect better to other people. In my mind, I couldn't make that shift because I was too busy. But in reality, I was shutting people out. I was shutting my life out. I needed that buffer, I felt. I was angry at my life and I didn't want to be in it. And I was ashamed. I didn't want people to see, how I was struggling and failing. And that's not really a good strategy either, to sort of hide when you need help. And in particular, I was unhappy about how my marriage ended. And I was emotionally overwhelmed and, pretty much all the time. And before the marriage ended, I was just I was trying to hold on to the marriage, and I would sort of manage that by keeping everything else in my life at arm's length. So, what ends up happening when you do that, when it ends, is you're disconnected from your whole life. So here's the second reason I'm giving you today about why now is a good time to start healing your covert avoidance. When you start opening up to real connection with people, you will begin to see more clearly what you've been afraid to look at in your own life. Whatever you have felt ashamed of, whatever has felt undoable for you. And when you stop hiding, you'll be better able to see. Now, back in the days when I was shutting people out, I didn't know exactly how to start opening up to people, how to make that work. And it hadn't gone well for me. And back then I didn't know that what was going on with me was PTSD from childhood. And I thought I was just a big secret failure, some sort of strange exception compared to other people who just struggled more than everybody else. And I was trying really hard to have good relationships, and I was going about it all wrong. I was trying not to be any trouble for people, probably an old idea left over from childhood that my feelings and needs and even my existence were a problem for other people. So I just try to muddle through. And getting through hard times all by yourself is a good thing to know how to do, but there comes a time when the avoidance has to stop if you're going to be happy. So it came to a head when I had a few years where a huge medical problem from an injury had snowballed into a whole series of surgeries that kept having complications. And this was right when my kid's dad and I separated, and we were hardly speaking to each other. And because for years I'd formed only superficial, put on a happy face friendships, I wasn't close to anyone anymore. And that meant I had almost no support. So one time, I went a whole week in the hospital with just one visitor for maybe an hour. And when it was time to go home, I needed somebody who could come pick me up and drive me. Literally, by law, they can't let you just take a cab home from the hospital. So somebody known to you has to drive you. So while I could see other people in the hospital getting flowers and hugs and happy families coming to drive them home, I had to make 10 phone calls to find anybody who would spend a couple of hours driving me home. Someone came. It was my meditation teacher, Paul Brown, and he's wonderful. But he came 3 times for me, and God bless him, and anybody who helped me at all during that time. I remember Paul got me some takeout food and got me settled on the sofa and kept me company for a little while. But this had been going on a long time, me not having the support that I needed. When you have small kids and you've had a lot of surgery, you physically need people to help you, or you're going to end up, just not being able to heal. And that is exactly what was happening to me. But this had been going on a long time, not having the kind of relationships that could sustain me in hard times like that. And that's what chronic avoidance will get you. You might get through one crisis by avoiding people in life, but the next crisis will come and lay you low. You'll face for real what's left when you spent years thinking that you had no choice but to protect yourself, protecting that fragile place inside that lives in fear of being judged and left out and alone. You really do end up alone when you avoid. And that's the third reason I'm giving you why now is the time to heal covert avoidance. When life gets hard, you'll need people who care about you. And they'll care for you because there's a long history of close connection, caring both ways, along with love and friendship and practical things. There may come a time when handling everything in isolation isn't going to be enough. You're going to need help, and that's uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially people like me who were neglected as kids. I just like to feel like I can do everything by myself. But help is a beautiful word, and you can begin to grow these lifelines of help right now by asking for help, offering help, and learning to set boundaries so that when someone asks too much from you, you know how to say no in the nicest possible way. You can also support your healing of avoidance by learning to calm triggers that make closeness with people just challenging, right? You can learn my method for that in my free course, The Daily Practice, and I'll link that in the description section down below too. Covert avoidance is an unconscious, usually, reaction to things that are triggery for you. And when you can reduce your reactivity to those types of things, you have more choices about how you want to respond. Maybe you need less contact with hurtful people or more contact with supportive people. Who these people are will become clearer to you when you're more regulated and less reactive. And finally, you can raise your awareness of covert avoidance and begin noticing, where are you doing it? One friend of mine who said she used to go to parties with a camera around her neck, she said she would do that so that she could have a camera, and if she were speaking with somebody for more than a couple minutes and it started to feel uncomfortable for her, she could go, okay, and she had a little excuse to leave the conversation and pretend to take pictures. Or she would carry a pen and a clipboard in her hand to a party, but it just looks like you're sort of in the middle of something. So you can always walk around as if you're enjoying the party like an observer, but never risk getting ignored in a conversation or trapped in a conversation where you don't have the boundaries to get out of it. Covert avoidance is subtle. It often comes along with wobbly boundaries. We find ourselves, as a result, collapsed on the sofa every evening. And even at home, we can do covert avoidance with people we love. Just going through the motions. How are you? Great, okay. Or we stay with people we never loved, just buying some time for that day when we can emotionally handle making changes. You can do avoidance through food, drugs, video games, or anything that numbs you, telling yourself that as soon as you can stop, you're going to get out of there and start your life again. I totally get it. And until you have a way to calm your triggers and handle stress when it comes, because it always comes, your trauma symptoms are going to dictate that you will be cut off from your own life. So thankfully, there is a way to calm your triggers and re-regulate, so you don't have to avoid anything. You don't have to fix your whole life at once either, which is good. Sometimes if you just orient yourself toward healing, and you can do one small thing a day, then more changes follow naturally.